Thank you, Marty, for being with us this morning to share your experience and insights about immigrants in our country and community. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for inviting me. It's a surprise to be here. It seems like just yesterday, my wife Karen and my best friend were living in Oklahoma, and we were both teaching at Oklahoma State. We're chemical engineers, and so we were teaching chemical engineering. Fast forward, which seems like 24 hours now, we're in Clemson. We love it. Karen has a wonderful boss. Where'd Cindy go?
She's teaching. She's teaching.
I'm plugging for a raise and she's not here.
My daughter will tell her.
It'll be on YouTube,
Oh,
so
excellent.
she'll have to give her a
Excellent. And it's just surprising that I'm standing here. Probably the most surprising person, the person with the most surprise would be my catechetical teacher. She would look at me here at a pulpit, and with my name aside the word sermon, and certain this is one of the 7 signs.
especially at a Unitarian Universalist.
Especially, yeah, born and raised a Lutheran, she would know that the end is near. So I'm here to tell you about one particular case that I've worked on now. I met who I was introduced to as Yumbi earlier in this year. Yumbi was born in Kumba, Cameroon, and if you're as geographically challenged as I was, I had to go look up where Cameroon is. I knew Africa, right? But where in Africa? It's on the west coast of Africa. Nigeria is to the north. Gabon and Equatorial Guinea is to the south. Atlantic Ocean is to the west, so it's on the coast of West Africa. Its history has been a tug of war between the colony of England and France. So the western half of Cameroon is Anglophone. The eastern half is Francophone. And Yumi grew up in Kumba, which is to the west, the grasslands of Cameroon. Cameroon is arguably the most homophobic country in the world. It doesn't. Well, first of all, it's a penalty of 5 years in prison engaging in a sexual activity, same-sex activity in Cameroon. A fine of approximately $500. And not only that, the thing that's surprising, that sounds awful, but not only that, there's 5 attorneys, 5, in a country that is an enormous country. It extends all the way up to Chad. There's a little sliver. A sliver in African terms means it's like 750 miles wide that extends up to Chad. In a country that big, that large, there's 5 attorneys that are willing to defend gay and lesbian folks in Cameroon. 5. The society is so tilted against homosexuals that it's even difficult to find someone to get documents notarized. They don't want to be associated with a document that has homosexuality in it. The fear is that pervasive. Yumbi lost his mother when he was fairly young. His stepdad died shortly thereafter. He lived with his grandmother. And as he was growing up, his grandmother taught him what most kids in Cameroon learn, that homosexuals are evil, they're deviant. You have to stay away from them. They're thieves, they're liars. And when Yumbi was about 18 years old, he was caught in a same-sex act by the wife of the man that he had a relationship with. And the man immediately threw him under the bus. Told his wife that he had drugged me and and this wasn't my fault, call the police, find this guy. And she did exactly that. He ran into the brush in Cameroon outside Kumba, stayed there for a few days. The man actually provided him some funding to get out of Cameroon. His best friend went back to his apartment, had to go back to his apartment. He couldn't go back. Yumbi himself couldn't go back because there was a mob that was forming. That's one of the ways, one of the regular ways that homosexuals are dealt with in Cameroon, by mob violence, who have been known to kill homosexuals. And if they don't die by the hand of a mob in Cameroon, the police usually do the job. So there wasn't an opportunity to look for the police. So he had some money, he had some basic papers, he had a Cameroonian ID, fled to Nigeria, and stayed in Nigeria for about a month, researched where he wanted to go, really didn't have any idea. Learned that the United States was one of the most tolerant countries for homophobia, less homophobic countries in the world, and decided that he was going to make his way to the United States. But he had a problem. He only had a Cameroonian ID, he didn't have a passport. And apparently, I didn't know this, apparently the only country in the world, at least in our hemisphere, that you can fly into without a passport is Ecuador. So he took the little bit of money that he had, got a flight to Ecuador, and landed in Ecuador. Then he traveled essentially by foot. And again, I had to look it up on Google Maps. Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and then up through Mexico, almost entirely on foot. That is a long trip. I wouldn't make that trip. He presented himself at the border, and this is important. A lot of people get concerned when people cross the border. He didn't do that. He presented himself at the border in San Ysidro, California, which is the border crossing that goes to Tijuana, and presented himself for asylum, which every person in the world has a right to do under international treaty. In fact, it's one of the Geneva Conventions that came out of World War II, that all countries observe the rights of refugees. And a refugee is a person that is not currently in their home country and is unwilling or unable to return to his home country. And he was certainly not willing to go back to Cameroon because he was certain he'd be killed. That was the easy part. Getting from Cameroon to San Ysidro. Then he encountered the odyssey that is the American United States immigration system. A lot of you probably don't appreciate that the immigration system in the U.S. is entirely civil. It's not criminal. So when someone presents themselves at the border and applies for asylum, they get thrown into a civil system. You ask yourself, why would it be civil? Well, because under a civil system, just so happens you don't have any rights. You don't have rights to attorney, you don't have rights to all the rights that would be afforded to you as a criminal defendant in the case. Now, if you cross the border illegally, that is a misdemeanor, and that's part of the conversation that's been going on in the country. So he was detained, first in Folkston, Georgia. Anybody been to Folkston, Georgia? There's a reason for that. Then he was moved to Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia. How many of you have been in Lumpkin, Georgia? It's a garden spot of Georgia, isn't it? It's actually, I like it, I think it's pretty, but it's a town that is going back to nature. A lot of the buildings are decrepit, there's very few people that live there, but out in the middle of Georgia, in the middle of nowhere, Georgia, is the Stewart Detention Center. There's no hotels in Lumpkin. The nearest hotel is 45, 50 miles away, either in Columbus, Georgia, or Eufaula, Alabama. There's no place for people to stay if they come to visit family members. There's a nonprofit called El Refugio that I'll talk about a little later. They provide bunk beds for people coming in to visit their families, but other than that, there's no place to stay, including for attorneys. So if attorneys want to help people there, they have to grab a hotel in Columbus or Buffalo. I try to get down there and back in one day, but it's an awfully long day. He went through a credible fear interview. That's the first step in asylum. An officer at the border asked him questions about why he didn't want to return to Cameroon, and he passed that credible fear interview and was sent into detention. And that's when he made his way from Folsom to Stewart. At Stewart, then he applied for asylum on his own. He did it pro se. His first asylum hearing was in front of an immigration judge, and he did that pro se as well. An immigration judge with a record of denying 99.8% of asylum applicants that come before him. The system is set up so that the Department of Homeland Security is the prosecuting agency. The immigration judge hears the case, and then the asylee, in this case, is all on his own to defend against the Department of Homeland Security. And to make it skewed even a little bit more, that immigration judge is an employee of the Justice Department. So it's hard to see where there's any fairness in the system. The chances of an asylee getting asylum increases about tenfold if they just have representation. He lost his first case, got appealed to the Board of Immigration Appeals. He actually did that on his own too, with help of a pro bono attorney. But he mostly did that on his own. The Board of Immigration Appeals overturned the immigration judge, returned it back to the court, and for a new hearing. And that's when I got involved, when the new hearing came into play. We had a hearing on July 12th, just a couple months ago, and he was granted asylum. And we thought everything was great. And then they were supposed to release him that day. And by the way, when they released him from the Stewart Detention Center, they're released with what they have in the prison: a pair of Crocs, sweatpants, and a T-shirt. That's it. They open the door and say, "Good luck to you." And Stewart is about 1.5 miles, 2 miles outside of Lumpkin. So the only thing that's in Lumpkin is a Dollar General. So I was working with the Southeast Immigrant Freedom Initiative, which is part of the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center. My church, University of Lutheran, we got some money together to get him a bus ticket. He had a friend in Minneapolis that he was heading towards. So we arranged all that, but they didn't release him. It took until the 30th to release him after we were working our way up. We were two levels below Kirsten Hillebrand to try to understand why this person wasn't being released when he was granted asylum. And we'll find out in a minute, but eventually he was released. We got him on a bus. He didn't want to fly. He was afraid of flying. And he took a bus, which was a 36-hour bus ride from Columbus, Georgia to Minneapolis. He was glad to get off the bus. And then 2 days after he made it to Minneapolis, the government filed a motion to reconsider, saying that he was a member of MS-13. So what was their basis? The deportation officer, who we have no idea what background she has. Yumbi was a tattoo artist in Cameroon, and he liked music. He's not much of a musician, but he liked music, and he had G-clefs all over his arms. Okay? And he actually used some red ink that he could find to make it appear, more colorful. That's all he had. He had blue ink from pens and red ink from pens. And the deportation officer basically said, if you take a look at those tattoos, you turn down the lights, you squint real hard, it looks like an M and an S. Well, okay, that belies the fact that MS-13 is a Hispanic gang that doesn't like blacks. And this man is from Cameroon. He's a dark-skinned individual from Cameroon. They didn't think maybe that was a relevant piece of evidence. We're still waiting to hear whether that motion is going to be granted or not. I hope it's not. So we still have that hanging over us at our heads. He moved to Minneapolis. He's doing well. We've applied for he can actually technically work right away. He wants to get a job. He's getting bored. He can technically work with an immigration court order, but he doesn't have a social security number yet. To get a social security number, we have to get an employee authorization document, which comes from the DHS. And of course, they're dragging their feet getting him the employee authorization documents that he needs. But he's doing well. I kind of scared him a bit about Minneapolis, and I told him it's going to be the average low temperature in Cameroon. I learned all about Cameroon, which was really great. The average low temperature in Cameroon year-wide, annually, is 61 degrees F. So I said, it's going to be a little different in Minneapolis. You might want to think about getting some warm clothing. And he was really concerned about this because he doesn't have any money. He has a little bit of money from us, and he has a pair of Crocs and sweatpants and a t-shirt. So I asked him to start up an Amazon wish list. And I obviously laid it on kind of thick, because if you take a look at the wish list, it's heavy parkas, long underwear, double insulated gloves. So I would like to share with you that wish list if you'd like to help you be out and buy him some clothes. He doesn't have anything over $40, I don't think, but he has essentially nothing. Which brings to mind another verse from Leviticus, which says, nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. And I can't think of a more deserving person who went through all that turmoil from Cameroon to Nigeria to Ecuador, up through Central America, essentially on foot. I can't think of a better American success story than this guy. If you met him, he's just a nice guy. And he just wants to have a life. That's all he wants. He just wants to have a life. And how can you help? If you're interested, the Southern Poverty Law Center's Southeastern Immigrant Freedom Initiative is a great organization, dedicated people. They found people to actually live in Lumpkin, Georgia. That takes dedication. And they live community style in a pretty nice mobile home, but these are young adults that are pretty talented, and they've given up a couple years of their lives to live in Lumpkin, Georgia. So donations to the SPLC Sci-Fi initiative would certainly be warranted. If you speak Spanish, I could take on very few clients now. I'm learning Spanish, but it's not going well. So I have this little niche area of Anglophones from Africa, and I have an expert witness that's been helping me too. That's excellent. But if you're a Spanish speaker, you can translate at Stewart. If you speak any other languages, French in particular, they're always looking for translators for documents remotely. They'll email you the documents to help things along and get documents translated, so you can serve remotely. And here's an interesting thing, to show you how impersonal the whole process is. They had his name wrong the whole time.
Oh.
His name is really, Yumbi is his last name. His name is Lefort Roberto Yumbi. And he knew it all along. He told me early on, but we knew for sure if we started referring to him in his correct sequence of names, it would just cause all sorts of problems. So he was Yumbi for a while. When he got released, and he said, I really like to be called Roberto. So if you'd like to help Roberto, I certainly have a way for you to do that. And I thank you for your time. And I'm not sure if I understood you right. Is it appropriate to take questions, or should we do that in the fellowship?
Why don't you stay here, up here at the end, and Jimmy, if you could maybe help corral people, because I know that there are people who will have questions afterwards. Thank you.
So I'm just a novice at this. This was my first case. I learned a lot. This is just a small slice of the immigration system. It doesn't have anything to do with applying for visas or anything like that. This is just purely asylum. But I'm learning all the time. I'm about to take up another case. It's hard to find an English-speaking detainee, but that's kind of the constraint constraints that I'm operating under, or I need someone to team up with and who can speak Spanish. And if I could do that, then I could take a Spanish-speaking client as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Attention.
Mike.